wanted to give you the opportunity, if there was anything you wanted to say after hearing the public comments, because your name was mentioned, completely up to you. If not, it's up to you.
I don't have anything to say.
Okay. Then I'll turn it over to Liberty to make whatever concluding statements they would like to make, and then I believe we would, we'll look at the next steps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't make the same mistake as I made last time. I accidentally was putting myself on mute. So, I think one of the things I did want to point out is we did respond to some of the questions that we heard last week. So we also have some copies available tonight for the public as well. We addressed some of the questions from last week. We did, before we kind of, as part of our closing statement, we think it's important to kind of touch upon a few of the things that we did here tonight. With that, I'll pass the mic over to my colleague, Rob.
All right, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Rob Manoli, Director of Project Permitting and Planning at Liberty. A little bit about me. I worked as a regulatory specialist in the electricity sector for about 25 years. I worked on many projects across the United States, Canada, and multiple countries in South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. For the last 17 years, I've worked almost exclusively in the renewable sector. I've probably worked on over 100 renewables projects as a consultant, as a government reviewer, and now at Liberty. Over this time, I gotta say, I've just not seen a lot of the negative things that we've heard about tonight play out in actual fact. We have one of our operators here tonight that if you have any questions can speak to, our experience, our landowners' experiences, and our community experience with respect to operation of wind farms. As detailed in our SLUP application, scientific and engineering studies have been done for thousands of turbines across the United States and globally, and they've shown that these projects are safe. They've shown that they're safe for people and for animals, for the environment, when they're planned correctly, like we've done with this project here in Speaker Township. And in fact, this is Liberty's own experience with the projects that we operate safely, including 2 in Michigan. I wouldn't work for this company if I didn't believe that that was in fact the case. In fact, when I was here last week, sitting in this very room, Liberty celebrated 10 years of no downtime in terms of safety record for operating facilities. That's I think quite an amazing achievement and demonstrates the commitment to safety that this company has, both to our employees and to the communities in which we operate. We wouldn't have that record if that wasn't a core value that we have as a company. I wanted to address some of the comments that Mr. Stevens expressed tonight. Really just wanted to point out that he spoke a lot about a different company and a different project. And obviously Liberty is not that company, and the Riverbend project is not that project. There's no relationship between us and what he spoke about. And we feel the standards that we uphold ourselves to are very high. Our special land use application was prepared using factual and scientific information that's proven to be true over many years of experience with other projects. The engineering information and analysis that we put into this project by a large team of our experts, including some of North America's most qualified ones that sit behind us here today, will ensure that this is a good, safe, reliable project. I guess based on the work that we've done and our experts, we believe we've designed this project in a way that preserves the health, safety of the people, the environment, and the animals within the township. We also feel that, of course, the project will contribute significant financial benefits to the community and other residents within the township. With that, I want to give Dr. Chris Wilson an opportunity to respond to some of the more specific comments and questions that have been raised tonight. And as Roberto mentioned earlier, if there's any other specific questions that you do have, I think we'd be happy to answer those for you. Chris?
Thanks, Rob. I've been asked to stand for the cameras so you guys see. Mr. Chair, committee members, members of the public, as you know, my name is Dr. Chris Olson, PhD in environmental health. I'm going to touch on 3 areas. First, we'll touch probably a little bit more in detail. That'll be the safety issue. Second, on the groundwater issue. And the third, generally on the health issue. The first is the safety issue. There seems to be a lot of misunderstanding in the community about what was actually provided. And I want to clear up that we should have all of this information in front of you. I'll just briefly touch on the various things. We certainly understand, first, it's in your ordinance, and second, we understood from the planning commission on a number of occasions, and the board even before we got to the hearing, that you wanted safety information from Vestas. So you've got all the information right behind you. So just to kind of go through what was provided. So on November 22nd, 2022, we provided a letter to Speaker Township, to the planning commission and the board from Vestas. Okay, and it's dated November 18th, 2022. This was specifically in relation to asking Vestas what their feelings were on the ordinance and the safety of putting their B162 machines into this community with the setbacks, with the sound and shadow requirements. And a quote from the letter, it says, based on the knowledge database, Vestas has reviewed the Speaker Township zoning ordinance number 102, effective date August 23rd, 2021, as provided by Algonquin Power. Vestas finds no concerns for the surrounding health and public safety. The wind turbines intended for the riverbed site, i.e. the B162s, are sufficient to meet public safety standards within the county ordinance. Obviously, there was a county or township there, but that was provided early on. So that's directly from Vestas, on letterhead Vestas to you folks. The next piece of information was given you. We gave you, in addition to that, the GE setback manual. That again is public information. And that was provided to you folks on December 2nd, 2022. It's contained within the material. It's about a 10-page document, again, publicly available on their setback recommendations, all of which align with the ordinance, and actually some of them are less strict in the ordinance. Then, still hearing from the board, you wanted safety data sheets, and you wanted the manuals and the like. On January 31st, 2023, we provided the safety data sheets from Vestas, requested from Vestas, all the safety data sheets for the turbines, for the materials within them. And within that, you also have a review letter from myself. It's a 3-page letter that walks through. So the data safety sheets, just to be clear, basically that binder. So it's over 1,000 pages. We provided them to you, as well as the covering letter that I have reviewed all the data sheets and my feelings on that. Also dealing with spill response and the legal requirements of the state. The spill was to occur, what those protocols are under the law of Michigan. On the 11th of July, 2023, going further than that, was the Dr. Rogers letter that we provided, a report, not a report, on blade failure and ice throw, specific to Speaker Township, specific to the B162, specific to the setback distances, showing you the probabilities, showing you the throw, showing you the distances, showing you that blade fragments would not go beyond 1,000 feet, they would be very small, and the vast majority fall into the jet height. So you have that. And then finally, on August 21st, 2023, under a cover letter, myself and that, most importantly, was the safety manual. Okay, so it's the Vestas Occupational Health and Safety and Environment Manual for renewable power plant sites. It is true, back when the V90 was the only machine Vestas was selling in North America, they had a V90 specific sheet back 10 years ago, whatever that model was. This is the manual that Vestas confirmed in the cover letter that covers all of their operating renewable energy sites. It is the only safety manual that is available. They do have, and I know there's requests for things like their operations manual, their erection manual, that, and they very clearly state these are proprietary. They are governed by proprietary information that is not very industry-wide, and there's no safety information for public health and safety within those manuals. If I turn to, and again, this is unredacted. It says restricted at the top, and the reason why there's no black line in this manual. And that manual is out of this whole document. They number every page a little differently, but it is again about 2.5 inches thick, double-sided. If you were to refer to what continues to come up, and it does all the time, sorry, actually it's 130 pages. So on page 14 of 130, it talks about establishing a temporary clearance area. And it states, When establishing a temporary clearance area in the event of a turbine incident, i.e. fire, runaway turbine, that means you get overspin and it goes out of control, where you could potentially have blade failure and debris, or debris separation, rope off or otherwise temporary cleared area with a minimum radius of 500 meters or 1,640 feet. Now, Vestas also provided you a letter, we provided at the same time, that explicitly talks about, and I apologize, I'm too many documents up in here, but it explicitly tells you that is not to be construed as a setback distance for residential or other land use, because it is a temporary clearance area. In the highly unlikely event, we have talked about blades can't fail, fires can't happen. Why is it not a setback that we would have to homes and the like? First of all, events are very rare. Second of all, we don't build neighborhoods, for example, and set houses back thousands of feet from each other in the event that there could potentially be a fire. Fortunately, if the fire was to happen in this hall tonight, we're not going to have the neighbors still sitting next door. The fire department's going to come, they will establish what they believe to be a reasonable area to make sure that people are safe. Same thing happens with the turbine, same thing happens with any safety side. So you folks have had, and I'm happy to answer any questions, I do my best to answer any questions on literally now thousands of pages of that. If there's something that you're worried about as a board or commissioner you don't have, I'm happy to answer, excuse me, to the best that I can. The ones that Vestas did not want to provide were the operations manual, the erection manual, and maintenance manual, because they're proprietary and they just can't release them. Very rarely is Vestas ever, I've never seen Vestas release safety data sheets ever. I very rarely see them submit the occupational health and safety manual, but we did request them to guide. So that would be on the safety side. Please, any questions that the commission has, I'd be happy to answer on that. We do have all of the available material that we have to provide. On the groundwater issue, there's too much going on. All right. On the groundwater issue, again, if you were to look at the letter that we provided to folks, I think it was on Tuesday, on the question and answer side, if you look at the second page of that, prepared two responses. One was the person who was on the Wells Road by Liberty. So I'll speak to that one specifically first. What happened was in the spring of 2023, like with any geotechnical investigation, the geotech investigation did not involve a track mounted drill rig. It involved a couple of geotechs out on an ATV with an ATV mounted, so four-wheeler mounted drill rig. What is that? It's basically a small auger. Okay? Small auger, but the size of 4-inch maybe diameter at most. What they do is they go out to the field where the turbines are meant to be placed, and they're doing investigation for foundation, suitability of soil for foundation. In that report, they drill 10 boreholes, we'll call boreholes, 10 test wells, or test holes, between the depths of 26 to 60 feet. Okay? At no point did they encounter bedrock, at no point did they encounter shale. They encountered soil, and various types of soil, but nothing unique to that. In those holes, they also installed monitoring wells. It's true. The monitoring wells that they installed were essentially a 1-inch diameter, and it's about 1.5 inch diameter PVC pipe that were placed in the holes after they were drilled and watered up, placed in the holes. And no, bentonite was not used to seal them. Bentonite is never used to seal the small little temporary gasometers. Those are for the large well casings. If you drill monitoring wells that are permanent or semi-permanent, that are steel well casings, 4-inch diameter, that are left there and meant to be permanently kind of go. If I was to drive around here and find probably at least a dozen right here in the community that people have drilled over the years, those are the types of wells that we drill if we're doing, let's say, a gas station investigation, looking for hydrocarbon leaks or fuel leaks off the gas station. Those absolutely have to be sealed with bentonite. So they take these little plastic pipes, they put them down the hole, and yeah, the soil factor fills and seals them. So they can also measure the groundwater depth, all the foundations. There is no way that doing that type of investigation caused any impacts to offsite groundwater. It's simply just not possible. Okay? And furthermore to that, I mean, none of the landowners, certainly, I'm told by Liberty, any of the landowners who believe that their wells have been impacted, to the best of my knowledge, Road can speak to this afternoon, have not come forward with Liberty. We'd certainly talk to them and work with them. Happy to continue to talk about it, say. Very quickly, with respect to Chatham Kent, it's an issue that I know well. And I worked right across North America. Certainly, it was a project that I personally worked on over in Ontario. There were, back in about 2017, there were, I think it was somewhere between 15 and 20 neighbors of a project that was installed in Chatham Kent area. And there's hundreds of turbines in the Chatham Kent area right now. They suspected their groundwater was impacted through construction of the turbines. Completely different type of construction. It was pile driving for installing foundations into the shale in the area. That said, the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, it changes names, it doesn't change government, like to change their government names because Ministry of Environment and Conservation Parks now. They issued a report in 2018 that said no, it was not the impact of turbine foundation installation or the ongoing operation of the turbines that caused the impact of the wells. Okay, obviously a very serious thing. Anybody who's on groundwater wells, which I know many of the community here is, in any rural community, but it was not turbines installed. 70,000 turbines across the U.S., another 8,000 in Canada. You simply do not impact groundwater wells. If they did, people wouldn't be able to drink, millions of Americans would not be able to drink from their wells. It has been reviewed by the ministry. They have numerous geotechnical investigations. It was not going to be part of the turbines. Finally, I'll touch briefly, and again, we're happy to answer more detailed commission questions. The issue of public health and safety. Really on getting to the heart of it. You know, sitting to my left here, Mr. Hankard, this is what he does for a living. He does noise reports. He's been doing it for decades, specifically with turbines. One of the foremost experts in North America on doing those sound reports. Sound report was done in the ANSI-ACP standard, which was recently published with both Mike and the SLUP committee for developing that standard. Mr. Kaliski, who did your review, also highly respected. There's been 5 guys that will tell you, 5 firms that will tell you. His firm, Mr. Kaliski's firm's on that list. He's giving you his analysis of the report. I won't speak to what he said. Dr. Neville, you read that into the record. Dr. McConaughey, physician, occupational environmental medicine board certified. Myself, others have reviewed weighted on this project. Often you'll see 1 or 2 of us on one of these hearings. Very rarely do you see the 5 of us on a profile project like this, and it's because there's been so many questions, valid questions from the community. Appendix G contains 30-some odd pages in the application that I put together for you to review the scientific literature. We continue to update that. We brought in Dr. Ron to the better and safety report. I certainly understand the concerns that people see. Certainly understand the concerns of the internet. Quite simply, following the ordinance, following the 50 dBA L10, which would be about a 48 decibel AQ equivalent, following the setbacks that we have, following the stringent shadow clicker guideline of 30 hours and 30 minutes at a time. These are all things that worked here in Michigan for 2 decades. They worked across the Midwest. They worked from California to Vermont. It is true there are varying standards across the country, across townships. Here, the reality is folks have an ordinance that is protected. You can pick and choose from various ordinances, this piece, that piece. Your board's done that. It's in line with other jurisdictions. You'll see in some cases it's more stringent than what the state has put down and will require, and in some cases candidly it's a little less stringent. But ultimately you've got Festus's information, you've got Mr. Hankers, you've got Dr. McConaughey, you've got Dr. Rogers, and you have myself, all coming to the same conclusion. This project, although I understand that some people do not want to live near turbines, this project will not cause public health, safety, or welfare impacts. People will be able to enjoy their properties the way that they have before. They will be able to live and sleep in their homes. Their kids will not be coming out from this project. With that, I'll turn it back to Ramon.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think I wanted to kind of close the loop here on, a few topics as well. So, as Chris and Rob have kind of alluded to already, is that, this is not a new industry. It's been around in the U.S. for over 2 decades now. There's 72,000 wind turbines that are operating safely across the U.S. There are 1,700 wind turbines operating safely in Michigan now for 15 years. operational. And Rob said earlier, as part of this story, we recently celebrated a decade of no lost time incidents at any of our operational sites, something that I hold close to my heart as well, because of course safety is the main core value of our business. Specific to Michigan, Liberty has an 8-year history of safely operating Deerfield 1 out in Huron County. After operating Deerfield 1 safely for 5 years, Liberty was able to expand that operation and was granted special land use to build a phase 2 of that project, which that project is also currently operational. I was fortunate enough to myself successfully develop and construct Deerfield 2. I've heard from locals how Liberty is held true to all its obligations, always continue to be a good neighbor throughout construction and operations. And again, we've got Adam Green here, who is our Deerfield 2 operations manager, who's here to answer any questions about concerns related to that. And in the end, as part of that project, we continue to take pride in building and fostering the relationships that we have with the local communities we operate in and being part of the continued growth of that community. You've heard me say also about how the project will bring several economic benefits to the community, and those are now in the form of new fees available for the state siting, property taxes, job creation, lease payments, and good neighbor agreements, which we're offering on this project. We've also heard several members of the public comment about property values being impacted by the development of the project, decommissioning concerns, wildlife being impacted, health and safety concerns, and a variety of topics related to turbine technology. We acknowledge those concerns, although we provided a very thorough and compliant application with contributions from, again, some of the industry's leading experts that demonstrate that the wind turbines do not pose a safety hazard or unreasonable risk of harm to the occupants of adjoining properties or area wildlife. Additional to that, we've responded, as I've said earlier, to the comments that we did receive last week, which you have printed out. Hopefully, we definitely sent it to you for the record. And the other thing I did want to clear up as well, which we heard more about last week, is we heard a lot of public comment regarding the state siting option being a threat, that we were threatening essentially the township, and we sincerely apologize that that's how that's being viewed by the public, but we're here stating the facts of the situation. I mean, the state siting bills was passed last year. It's going to come into effect this November. Under that bill, there will indeed be less stringent standards for sound, 1.5 times louder and shouting quicker than the current speed ordinance. If the project is not successful in approval this evening, or if the noise standard is found to be different from that to which we designed the application, an application will be submitted under this new law. But again, like I said at the beginning, we want to work with you tonight and seek approval for this application since it is compliant under these more stringent rules. With that being said, I'd like to reiterate the wind project will comply with all sections of the ordinance, and including any reasonable conditions, which we're happy to discuss,
So is there a motion then to close the public hearing portion?
I'll make the motion to close the public hearing portion of it.
Okay, there's a motion, is there a second? I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We have closed the public hearing portion of the meeting. We are resuming the special meeting portion, and I know I have a number of questions. We only have one, maybe a couple microphones. My thought is maybe have a microphone. Bill, do you mind if you start with the microphone, ask questions, and then we'll kind of move down the line? Or I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have any questions.
I got lots of questions.
Some of ours will probably be overlapping, so.
I guess the first question, should I talk to the microphone? It's on. Still on?
Hello?
All right, so I have some questions per the Townley report, and possibly if Liberty would like to maybe voice an opinion on it too, since there was a lot of updates done that I don't think we were all clear of until the last minute. So on Townley's report number 8, I'll start with this one with the first question. Townley notes that the environmental report is incomplete and that it does not identify the environmental impact from construction. Moreover, it acknowledges the federal permits are required for protection of bats, birds, and endangered species. Per page 3 and 4 and 3 and 5 of the Speaker Township Master Plan, land use requirements state that the federal permits should not receive final township approval until satisfactory evidence has been submitted verifying the acquisition of all the necessary permits. Do we have all that information in our files? I personally can't answer that question, so I'm asking.
Is that a question for Liberty or?
Well, we'll start with Townley. I mean, does he have the information? Because I also been given some notes here too that there was multiple updates from Liberty, as I think Mr. Olson or Dr. Olson just said, that I don't think this committee was fully aware of all the updates, and I do know that Townley recorded the same thing on his last update because there weren't answers until like last week, if I'm correct. There was even answers done in the month of December that we were not aware of. Any updates until last week. It seemed like a crash course when this meeting was scheduled to get all these updates in. So I'm asking just for clarification.
Sure, let me try to answer your question. Regarding the timing of the comments, our comments were completed in December and provided to the township to review and comment. They were not at that time then sent to Liberty to respond to. And so I was contacted by Liberty prior to the meeting that we had last Tuesday that they had not received that information. And so I sent that to them that evening, later that evening, about 10 o'clock at night actually. And then they took time that next day to provide responses to my final comments, which was in letter form. So that's answers the timing of the crunch at the end there. Regarding whether they have submitted all of their documents, I believe they have. I mean, even in the comments, you were looking at item 8 on the spreadsheet.
Yes.
11A06. Section 11A06.
I mean, the last update I see on my report right here, it says 11 TE comments, 11/28 to 23.
Correct. So I had no further comments. So some of the things that you're seeing in my, I call it a spreadsheet or my log, are the original comments, then a log of Liberty's response, And then if we had further comments, then those would be also posted in that far right column. So when you don't see any more comments in the far right column from 11/28, which were then reflected into our December 3rd letter, okay, it's basically the same timing. So, but when you don't see any comments in that far right column, that means we didn't have any more questions or concerns about that. And when you look back over into about the third or fourth column, where it says it meets the ordinance, we've identified that yes, it's complete, it's fulfilling the obligation and request of the ordinance. Did that help at all?
Well, yeah, but I mean, for some reason, my summary description still says, I mean, I'm sure yours does too, this study is just an explanation of potential impacts of construction of the WECS and facilities. No environmental migration plan could be found.
That's correct. So that was the summary description of the initial finding. Then the comments followed up on that. Then Liberty responded to that. Then we had no further comments, so we didn't make any comments. So we went back and revised the ordinance item to say meets ordinance. So yeah, so I probably am providing more information than you wanted due to the fact that I have tried to provide you with a somewhat of a log of what's happened and corresponded over some time. I haven't simply taken the final response and said, this is the final answer. But if you look at the letter, that should be a summary of the major issues or even the outstanding issues, yes.
Well, I guess another concern I had is there was many comments tonight that was made that you, somewhere on here, which I can't find that, or these comments that were made, is that you made the comment that our ordinance book and their application fall within the ordinances, and you clearly have issues on here that it does not fall within the ordinance. So I'm asking for how did you come up with a recommendation that it should be approved when there is still things in question that aren't within our ordinance book?
So what I think I said, and you can pull the tape and review it, but what I think I said was that based on our review of the ordinance, we recommended that you review our document, ask questions as you are, and then approve with any conditions that you have that may be coming from me, may be coming, and I'll add this, may be coming from the public or any other expert that you have hired or have consulted.
So then that recommendation, just so I'm clear, you're telling me that you're recommending us approval with conditions, with things clearly stated out of our ordinance in this report?
So which item are you specifically looking at when you look under the meets ordinance section?
Well, there was one, let's start right off the bat. I mean, there's an issue on one of these. Let me find it. Well, the clear cutting, number 22, to limit clear cutting to the greatest extent possible is what the ordinance book says. Liberty should be required to identify the trees it wants to clear cut in its SLUP, if its SLUP is granted. I don't have anything that shows where they planned on what my site plan or anything that says about any trees that planted, or they say they're even gonna do it, they're gonna cut them down. I don't see anything there. There's also one on the.
So 22, the ordinance says the clear cutting of trees and woods shall be limited to the greatest extent possible. Limited to the greatest extent possible. Their last comment was tree clearing will be minimized to the greatest extent possible. Where tree clearing is required, participating landowners will be notified well in advance of the start of construction. Trees will not be cleared on non-participating properties. So I'm saying that meets the ordinance. The ordinance says that the trees and woods shall be limited, clear cutting shall be limited to the greatest extent possible. They're saying they're going to minimize it to the greatest extent possible. My recommendation to you is if you're not happy with my yes, or if you're not happy with their explanation of what they're proposing to do, then you make that a condition of their permit to identify what areas they're going to cut trees and have to clear area in order to make their project work. And it's also my understanding that in some instances, and I'm not totally familiar with the process going forward from here, but as they have not completed a design, right? They've cited these, but the design, the exact design of them has not been 100% completed. They have not submitted site plan design for your review. And so you could make it a condition of the site plan design that they show on their drawing a boundary of, clear cutting or tree trimming or whatever. But yeah, this is to me, this is a living document. It's a guide for you. It's an aid. It's a tool. It's not a blanket approval by any means. Some of the people kindly have said how good it is and how Townley has said, yes, approve it. But I'm pretty sure I'm on record from last week of saying approve it with conditions. My conditions and your conditions. And Liberty themselves have said, I'll exaggerate here a little bit, pile on the conditions, we can take it. I'm paraphrasing in a very extreme format. They probably might not agree with me, but that's I'm sure they're willing to talk about conditions.
It's in the record now, so.
Well, I have probably, 20 of them, so I'll have more later that we can clarify, because I just want clarification, so I will let it go to the next PC member to ask a question.
Yeah, and again, for the record, I am available. You have my contact information. Whether we have a public discussion about each particular item or an individual discussion, that's perfectly fine with me. That's not a problem.
So on 25 in your report, it says that Tom Rose says certain proposed turbine locations must be field measured to ensure compliance because of inherent variance in using satellite measurements. So I assume the satellite measurements are inaccurate.
So, my comments were on 25 were that, they had numerical studies. They had evolved them out and do some measurements, and I compared those measurements to Esri, which is the software that we use, and the measuring on Esri is accurate, but it's not always, it's not survey accurate, and it's not as accurate as a site plan design will be. And so, what I have identified in, for example, this table was, that I showed last week, were some of the locations that are very close to the setback locations. And so I simply would ask that when they warn them that when they're citing those and getting ready to send you a site plan that has those on it, that they make sure that they are truly meeting the setback requirements. Because like your setback requirements are from the turbine hub, the column, right? Into the structure, or to the property line. And so, how do you interpret that? Do you interpret that being the center point of the hub or turbine? Or do you interpret that to be the outside diameter, the periphery, the circumference of it, the outside edge of it? And so, when I'm clicking on my mouse on Esri, I can't necessarily pick the exact point of the center, nor can I pick the diameter, the outside diameter, the circumference, peripheral perimeter of it. And so there's some width in there. So when they say that they're within 1.3 feet of meeting the setback, that's a warning. So, to me, again, that's a potential another condition that they already know they have to do. They know they can't locate a turbine within so many feet of a residence, because if they do, and somebody hires a surveyor to come out there and measure it, and it's wrong, I mean, the turbine's down. I mean, they're gonna have to take it down, they're gonna have to move it over 10 feet, or, or abandon it, so. Yeah.
We can weigh in on that quickly, that might help also. We did suggest a condition of approval that would require that, changes to wind turbine locations necessary to ensure compliance with setbacks may not exceed 100 feet without prior written approval of the planning commission, could be administratively approved, so that, as Mr. Townley is suggesting, there would be a formal ultimate survey done to verify compliance where any of these locations are close. And then the turbines could be microsited 5 feet one way or the other to ensure compliance with the ordinance, for example. So we did try to accommodate in the draft conditions that we prepared specific language to accommodate any concerns on that specific issue.
All right, I got another one as well on, ambient noise, the, 45 to 46. So it says pending as no construction, ambient noise levels shall be measured at the building's exterior, potential effect on existing residents, schools, hospitals, churches, public libraries. They, Liberty themselves said it has to be to compliance. I personally feel that, you guys should already have that figured out, being that you have your Deerfield, wind energy 2 project completed, and with your 656 turbines, I feel that that should be due, and, with a yes, not pending.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, let me address that comment quickly. So the way that your ordinance works, it requires 2 things. It is very protective in this regard. First, it requires modeling to be done, because until the project is built, there can be no measurement taken, clearly. So what we do is we use a modeling process, and this is what all wind projects across the country do. They use a modeling project program that is both accurate and well tested, and is also conservative. That is, the results that it produces, and I can have our sound expert speak to this further if you'd like, that is, the results that it produces are likely higher than they will actually be when they're measured. And then as an additional protective measure in your ordinance requires that once the project is built, there is actual sampling conducted to ensure that what the model predicts is in fact accurate. And if it's not, then it would be appropriate at that point for the applicant to find a way to meet that standard. The applicant would have to find a way to meet that standard, and that would typically be done by curtailment or operation in our own mode or noise-reduced operation mode, which is effectively a derating of the turbine. So there is the very typically accurate modeling that is done. There is the then testing out of that model after construction, and then there is a solution if in fact it is unexpectedly incorrect. So that is all very well done.
So, you don't have an existing model, already in place, and you don't have numbers to back, what's going on with that existing model, like the ones that you proposed to us?
No, we absolutely do, and I think we should let our sound expert speak on that.
Yeah.
Repeat your question.
You don't have an existing, turbine model, like you were stating that the ones that you proposed to us, you don't have one with numbers to show, for sound?
Right, so my company and other companies across the country have measured every turbine model essentially that's come along to date. And we continually compare it to our predictions to make sure that we really want to over-predict a little bit, so that if we tell you we're going to be under 50, we really are in actuality. And so this model has proven itself across multiple turbine sites, multiple turbine models, multiple atmospheric conditions. We have really tested the heck out of this thing.
And maybe just that, Mr. Chair, and Commissioners, so as I was saying before, the model, and you're right, the model's a model, right? So how do we know the model's accurate? Mr. Hager said they've done thousands of hours of testing. That was all built into a standard, an American National Standards Institute standard that's published, so that everybody does the model in the same way across the country now, so that you folks would have certainty in that. And that was Mr. Hager, Mr. Kaliski, who was on did your review, myself and about a half dozen others, sat for over a year to making sure that standard that got developed was based on these thousands, tens of thousands of hours of measurements from Mr. Kaliski and Mr. Hager and the other noise experts. So if the model, if we go test after and it's not accurate and we're over, it costs the company a whole lot of money because when all says they derate them, every time you turn the turbine down, it's producing less power, so it behooves the noise guys to get it right in the first place, so they're not losing more money by having to turn them down.
So with respect to the specific turbines, I believe, I looked on the website a while ago, but was it 104.8 EDA, is that what they're, like the sound at the source, has that actually been verified, or is that an estimate? Because I know these are relatively newer, so what level of verification was done on that specific model?
Right, I would have to, is this on, you hear me? Yeah, the turbine manufacturers provide us with that data, and as they produce new models, they have a test site, turbine manufacturers have various test sites, and they will go out and measure these new models. Now, if a model hasn't ever been erected at a test site, they will take data from the previous model and make their estimation as to how it might change for the new model. Does that make sense?
So as far as, offhand, you don't have to know everything, but you're not sure if these specific models have been verified or if it's based on previous.
I would need to verify that, Mr. Chairman.
And then one of the things I found interesting when I visited Liberty's other project is it seemed like the shorter turbines actually could have been just visual. It looked like they were spinning faster than the larger ones. Does that have an impact on sound? And if so, what?
Okay, yeah, no, that's an absolute correct observation. The physics of acoustics is that the faster these things spin, the louder. So interestingly, these newer, larger turbines can in many respects go quieter than those because they turn more slow.
And from an infrasound level, do you want to make any comments on that? Does that change anything if it's a larger?
Yeah, theoretically, a larger turbine would produce additional infrasound. But please keep in mind that the infrasound levels these turbines produce orders of magnitude below our hearing thresholds. This has been tested many ways. So even the larger turbines, if they produce a little bit more infrasound, it still doesn't come close to our ability to perceive.
Okay. And then I think your report mentioned I won't pretend to understand the technicalities, but a 0.5 absorption level, and there were examples of what that looks like, from fresh until ground or fresh snow, or different examples that would fall in a different spectrum. How would you rate like winter ice storm, ground is bare but frozen, no leaves on the tree? Is that still like a 0.5 or is that closer to a 0.0? And what impact would that have?
I mean, theoretically, a frozen ground, hard ground would be more like a zero. Keep in mind that when we went through this committee, Chris mentioned, to develop a standard that we follow here, that takes into account all manner of ground types and atmospheric conditions, because we understand that we can't exceed under any of those conditions. So the model really has enough conservatism built in to withstand that condition that you're referring to.
So if in post-construction monitoring, are those the types of conditions that would be monitored? Like this is a prime, highest possible wind noise scenario, ground's frozen, wind's high. Is that when that would typically
That is absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. When my company gets hired to do one of these studies, I want sure that we leave our monitors out for months, and I wanna make sure that we cover every condition. I don't wanna just go out there on a Tuesday morning and test it and call it good. We wanna make sure we capture the worst case to protect all parties involved.
I think that's all I have in sound, unless anyone else you have any questions.
Mr. Hager, can you comment on what conditions did you model under as far as weather and absorption?
Sure. So the standard that we follow pretty much assumes the worst case, which is temperature and relative humidity that has a low absorption. So we're modeling a condition where we know the sound is going to propagate well through the atmosphere. Something that's called temperature inversion, which can occur. The model assumes a moderate temperature inversion. Again, it's worst case, and the most important thing is that we've compared the results of our predictions to measurements at actual sites. And the measurements that we compare to are, again, these worst case. They're the loudest measurement that we got at a site. Let's find out how the model does in comparison to that. Not the average, not the minimum, but the loudest that we measured at a given site. So I can't implore enough how well tested this model is. Because as Chris mentioned, if I tell them that it's okay to put a turbine close to a house and the noise level turns out to be too loud, that's a real problem for myself, company, you, everything. So we have strived to make sure that will be.
And sorry, Dr. Gilbert, one of the things you noticed in Mr. Gillespie's report is that he had said that we didn't account for icing conditions. And so, in their icing conditions, we actually have not ice like just around the area, but when ice builds up the turbine blades, it can destabilize the blades a little bit and become louder. And what the commitment is, that you've heard from Liberty, for a number of reasons, ice throw plus this noise condition, is that the turbines will be shut down during the icing conditions. So if there's ice in the blades, the turbines will be shut down. Again, another condition, I'll be honest, I don't know if the lawyers put it in as a draft condition or not, but another condition that you could put in is to ensure that turbines will be shut down during ice buildup conditions on the blade. And that's the commitment that Liberty's made. That was what Mr. Gillespie mentioned in the report, and that was the response to the divvy, is that was the one thing you can't model. Nobody can model that condition. So what do? You shut it off during that time frame.
A follow-up question on that. Did you, in fact, measure ambient sound levels, or did you use a 50 dB LEQ as your starting point on your predictions?
In our report, we do not have any ambient sound information. We predicted the noise from the turbines and compared it to the 50 dBA standard. They felt 10, 50 dBA standard.
And maybe just to clarify quickly as well, and so what, and you'll see it in the report, what Mike did when he was, collecting the predicted noise level is he, the model, I guess, measures it at an LEQ, and then to get to a L10, you add 2 decibels. And that method was used to predict what L10 would be. And Mike, please correct me if I misspoke there.
You did not.
So, under the L10 scenario, like what is the, I guess in your opinion, what would be the maximum amount of sound that could occur, is likely to occur, whether it's startup or any other sort of process that's not normal operation, that would contribute to that 10 minutes of, I guess, additional sound outside of the 50 or 45 or whatever the standard was?
There was some testimony earlier that said something to the effect of wind turbines can all of a sudden increase sound levels by 10 to 15 decibels. That is patently false. I have personally sat in a lawn chair at many participants' homes at 3 projects in Michigan and a dozen others across the country. When these machines get up and running, they are quite consistent. They don't turn on a dime. They're fairly large, so there's no drastic, all of a sudden increase in noise. That simply does not happen. Once they're going at their full RPM, there's a very consistent sound that goes on. Well, I mean, they get louder as they ramp up, but once they reach that maximum, because keep in mind, they have a maximum speed. They can't just keep, if the wind keeps blowing, once they reach maximum speed, that's it, they stay at that speed. And the sound, again, is quite consistent.
So there's no sound, there's no increased sound of like wind whistling past turbines as it's getting up to speed or anything like that?
I mean, I wouldn't say there's zero, Mr. Chairman. Sure, some gust comes along, but to be honest with you, it's very hard when you're sitting there to understand, was it, I mean, because it's rattling the trees and it's rattling everything else. It's not like the turbine all of a sudden rises up and does something drastic. No, sir.
In post-construction monitoring, do you use the same standard? You use LEQ?
Our sound meters are capable of measuring LEQ and L10 at the same time. Yes, if it was up to me as a scientist and I didn't have to worry about a rule or a regulation, I would use LEQ because that is just what we measure everything in acoustics, highways, gravitics, whatever.
And that's boots on the ground monitoring.
Boots on the ground, yes, sir.
Are there any other questions about sound?
I have a lot of questions on sound. My first question is,
Get a microphone.
oh, Jesus. Is it on?
Oh. Okay.
My first question on sound is there was some discussion made at the beginning of the public hearing of what ordinance that we're going off of, which is causing a lot of confusion at this playing table, trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. The attorney recommended the decibels to be in 45, is what his recommendations were to the planning commission before this public hearing started. So just to clarify that right now, okay. So with that being said right now, I think a decision needs to be made before this planning commission can proceed. And I will personally, with the information that I have found and the attorney's recommendation, I will make a motion that this planning commission uses the 45 decibel sound ordinance that the attorney recommended moving forward.
I'll second that.
So there's a second. Is there any discussion anyone has in terms of opinions, one way or the other? Laura, I don't know if you want to speak. I can put the microphone up to the computer for the sake of thing.
Sure, hear my voice, everyone, under the weather, which I'm sure sounds great, echoing through there. So to clarify that would be the version of the ordinance that the Township Board adopted back in August of 2021 that included a 45 dBA or ambient plus 5 sound measure rather than the 50 that sort of erroneously got out there.
Okay, and to confirm, and this is my understanding, but feel free to correct me if I get it wrong. There was a version from April that included some updates, including removing height limitations and other things. And there was a version from May that included those changes as well as ADLS plus 45 decibels for, and only for non-participating properties, not for participating properties. Those are the versions based on the records you've seen that we have that went through the planning commission, were voted on, went through the township board and were voted on, went to the county planning commission and were reviewed, and then apparently something happened where the April version is what got signed instead of the May version, which was the one that was voted on. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct, and I think the notice of adoption reflects that it would have been the May version with the 45 dBA that was actually the one considered by the board, but the rest I think that is all correct.
And I do want to give Liberty a chance to respond. And one of the things you said previously was that Liberty wasn't involved in the amendment process. And I guess that surprised me a little bit Liberty had requested some of the initial changes. Is that correct? And I guess what level of involvement did Liberty have in terms of awareness of the discussion and process at the planning commission and county board level?
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't involved at the time, so I wanted to ask. I'm told that, representatives from Liberty did attend the meetings, but weren't involved ultimately in drafting, making recommendations on particular changes involved in processing of the ordinance or reviewing it before it went different places. And so when I said they weren't involved in the process, that's what I meant. And basically, they were involved early on, made comments, and then after the ordinance was adopted, they asked for a copy of the adopted ordinance and were given the version that's 50 dB. And then, as I said the other night, that's the version that exists and existed for 3.5 years and still exists on the township's website, and that the project was based on. And I won't restate everything I said the other night. It probably isn't super productive, but I guess two comments. The first is, as I stated, I think that there's good case law that indicates that Michigan courts do apply rules of estoppel, latches, and that the public policy, I think, is and should be, it only makes sense that a township should not seek to prevent or disclaim the published and posted ordinances on its website and in its ordinance book on the grounds that there was an irregularity in the way that came to be the version of the ordinance that is on its website and in its ordinance book. And your counsel is very competent and good to work with. And I appreciate your thoughts on this, obviously, but we disagree that this. We think that really the seminal case on this point is the one that I quoted from the other night. And it only makes sense. I mean, again, you can't have an applicant spend millions of dollars on a project and then tell them that the law is different than what you told them that they designed the project. It can't go, posting a speed limit sign of 55 miles an hour and then giving somebody a ticket when they're going 55 miles an hour and say, oh, we actually meant to post 45 miles an hour. So that's the first thought. And then I guess the second thought is we did provide in the draft conditions that we provided Ms. Genovich, and I think that she also provided to you, some language that proposes a possible resolution of this, which is that the Planning Commission, clearly we're not going to necessarily be able to, sounds like, come to a full complete agreement that the Planning Commission is satisfied with how the ordinance got adopted and really which ordinance should be the one to use tonight. But what the condition that we provided says that the applicant shall comply with the sound limit determined to be applicable to the project by a court of competent jurisdiction or mutually agreed by the applicant and township board via binding stipulation, self-agreement, consent judgment, or other similar mechanism. And the reason we think that makes sense is that it allows the township to move forward, process this application, come up with reasonable conditions of approval, and get the benefits that the township can receive now by acting now, as opposed to denying the application, potentially, on the basis that you think it doesn't comply with the sound standard, and then miss out on all the other benefits that would be afforded by compliance with the current ordinance and also the availability of funds from the state. So I guess I want to just throw that out there as an option for you to consider. It maybe wouldn't necessarily require that you decide, in fact, what is the right version tonight, because I understand that's going to be hard for you to do.
And just so I may go full these specific before, was that a situation where there was a vested right?
There was not in that case. The applicant actually wanted a permit and did not have a permit and was seeking a permit. And
this ordinance for years and millions of dollars were spent in reliance on that. We think the borough council is the right version of this.
Laura, was there anything else you want to add to that? No? Is there any further discussion? No. All right, so there's a motion and a second to apply the 45 dBA version of the ordinance. There will be no further discussion. I think we'll take a roll call vote, starting with you, Bill.
Aye.
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 No. So we have 4 to 1. We will apply the 45 dBA version of the ordinance. So where were we? Sound, right? Bill, you said you had a lot of questions. We wanted to resolve that issue first.
I do. Well, I mean, we have a lot of questions. We've been talking about the DVA for the last, and the sound for the last half an hour. And I mean, I guess as a PC level, we need clarification.
Can we keep audience comments down, please? Sorry.
No, that's all I have to say about that. At least now we know as a PC what ordinance that we're gonna follow as far as moving forward on the resolution, so.
Since the issue of financial benefits came up, I wanted to talk about that. To me, it's not a significant issue one way or the other, but I did want to make sure we're clear on the record. There was an offer, I think, in the presentation of offering a community financial benefit agreement. I didn't see that in the conditions that were proposed. And I also just wanted to confirm for the record, because there's been talk of, there's $750,000 that we lose out on. What percentage of that would be guaranteed if there was a condition addressing financial compensation for the township?
The proposal was that if the 50 dBA version we had contemplated and kicked around with the council somewhat, but didn't indicate to be discussed tonight. The concept was that the 50 dBA version of the ordinance was used, that Liberty would pay via condition of approval $2,000 per megawatt. The township then has the right under the Renewables Ready Community Award Program to make applications. And initially, that application had to be filed by September 30th. I checked today, and that has now been lifted because that requirement has been lifted, and they said, well, no, we're just going to continue accepting applications until the money is gone. But it is a first come, first served program. There's $30 million available, and it awards $5,000 per megawatt of capacity in the township that is approved through the local siting process instead of going to state site. So the $2,000 is guaranteed would be guaranteed by Liberty. The $5,000 is a state grant. You have to make the application. It's first come, first served. They were going to close the application September 30th. Now apparently they've still got time left, so they've eliminated that. They've got a lot of money left, I guess. So they've eliminated that requirement to submit by September 30th. So it's total $7,000 to guarantee back to the state.
And you answered part of that, but the state funding, that would presumably the first come, first served is when the application gets to them. And I don't know what requirements go along with that, but do you have which one?
So it's
The
right.
whole house is right?
No, when I say glass house, greenhouse mode is what we call it, but yes, it is the model that's used, and this model is used right around the world. There's some variation of what sound models are used. One that might be is the one here in North America. For shadow really is the universal model, whether you're in Australia, you're in Europe, or you're here. And what it does is that it assumes the center of the house, and it puts a 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 so cubic meter of basically a greenhouse at that position. And then when the blade, because the shadow isn't just going to catch the edge of that, it's going to sweep the area. And so it's assumed that it's going to hit the entire house. If it hits the house in that area, a meter squared, then it will then predict shadow flicker. So it does not, you don't have to, of course, nobody lives in one, even the tiny house are 1 meter cube, but it does accurately predict because it's a wide sweeping shadow that comes over the area. So you're not going to under-predict the amount of shadow flicker on the home itself.
So even if the cube is in the center of the house, and obviously based on where the sun is in the sky, I'm picturing the shadow is gonna move, like this across the house. So if you're using a 1 meter cube, you're gonna catch, the one tip of the blade at some important part of the year, and then it's gonna catch the rest of it, and then you're gonna get out of the 1 meter cube. But wouldn't there still be whatever portion is in the house before you hit the 1 meter and then after?
So, Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me, could I just come on board?
Absolutely, I want to understand.
I'm going to use my hands here, we're waiting around, and just up here for a second. So let's pretend this is the 1 meter cube, right? On the shadow flicker side. Let's say the house is, obviously a lot longer than that. If you were at the very edge of the shadow flicker domain, where just the tip is potentially catching, of the shadows catching maybe a corner of this, or maybe catches over here, but not this 1 meter cube, you're so far beyond the 30 hours a year distance that you're down to like maybe that's 30 seconds a year, maybe that's a couple of minutes, maybe that's 15 minutes a year. So you're far below what the standard is of the 30 hours or 30 minutes. When you're much closer, right, so if I'm way back here, and it just barely catches the house, you're so far below the standard that it's not a concern. It's much more diffuse. Where it becomes a concern, of course, when you're closer in, when that shadow's coming over, it's coming a wide swept shadow over the area. So that 30 hours, like 30 minutes of talking, if you look at the report, those are the houses that are closer in, and you're not missing by any means any of the shadow cast. Let's say you had windows here, you had windows here, it assumes that it's just going to, in all those rooms where you have windows facing the turbine, there will be flicker in those individual rooms. So you're not missing, you're not undercounting. It's just the way that the model's been designed and proven is that it's, again, because you're so far away, you'd be nowhere near that 30-hour standard in order to catch the tip, you know what I mean?
Yes, that helps. So, because the sun in position to the turbine is going to move gradually, right? So are you saying you're on or you're off very suddenly based on where the sun is, so that you're either going to be getting flicker or not?
What I'm saying is that so when that duration, right, so as the sun's rising, right, so let's say the sun's over here in the east rising, I'm the turbine, that's the house. So as it's rising, there will be a certain period of time where it comes through me as the turbine, and that shadow is being cast over the house as the turbine blades are spinning. As the sun rises, it depends on exactly the angle of the sun, where the turbine, where the house is, that dictates how long that event will be, whether it's 1 minute at a time, because it happens to be just a weird angle towards house, or maybe it's 45 minutes. But regardless, but as you get further away, right, and the shadow that's being cast is a lot weaker, it's barely touching the tip of that house, again, and it's very quick from where the angle is as it's rising. So it's really just a physics model on what's catching the house. So the 1 meter cube that we're just placing there is basically represents the center of the house and assumes which windows on that side facing. So we're not underestimating the amount of shadow flicker that would be at home. If you were, let's say, a mile and a half out, you could possibly then underestimate by maybe a couple of minutes, but again, it would only be a couple of minutes a year that you would even have shadow flicker. So the closer you're in, that's where you're going to get more shadow flicker. That's where the actual shadows are going to come right over the whole area from the turbine, and you're not missing anything from the house itself. If that makes sense. We maybe can't check pictorial, I'm sorry, maybe.
And I sometimes in the year, I can sit in the seat at dinner time and the sun is not a problem. Sometimes it is a little bit of a problem. Then there's, a few weeks or a month or so where we have to, put a curtain up or something like that, or, rearrange the seating because the sun is so bright at that seat. So, to me, if that's shining to a turbine, you're gonna get, that part of the house is gonna get different amounts of shadow flicker. And if that's measuring like, 1 potential meter cube, if I put the meter cube on a different part of the house, or an upstairs or downstairs, that's gonna get different amounts of light. If I can sit in the same room, I can sit on the opposite side of the room, and I can, look out that window perfectly fine, no issues. So that's in my head when I picture that.
I think Mr. Chair, what you're describing there, right, is that different times of the year, you're getting different light intensities in your house. Again, those are the different, the shadow flicker, what the shadow flicker model does is predict exactly the day, the time that that shadow flicker will occur. Yes, typically, in this area, that shadow flicker, most of the times can occur in the spring and fall. The sun's hanging nice and low in the sky, where we have the sunrise and sunset. Other times of the year, the sun's not at the angle in order to affect the house at all. When we look at that model, if you were to take this has been done, if you take that cube, let's say, where we put it in the center of the house, if you move it, be 15 feet or 20 feet, depending on how big the house is, to the left, or 15 or 20 feet to the right, it doesn't change the results, other than like maybe a fraction of a bit. Because the area of the sweep of the blade and the area of the shadow that's cast in the house, that's why we don't use the 1 cubic meter. It's just the way that this is designed the model. But we're having sensitivity analysis done by shaking it around to make sure, like I say, if you're, let's say, a mile and a half versus 2,000 feet, that's where you might get the difference because of that little tip of the shadow maybe hitting the house or maybe not. If you're closer in, if there's going to be shadow flicker, it's hitting the house, and that's the model saves.
What about if it's a different building on the property? So the ordinance doesn't, as I read it, specify it has to be on a dwelling of a, non-participating property. I think that's how the report was prepared. But would there be a different amount of shadow flicker, cumulatively greater shadow flicker that one of your cubes was put in, a workshop or a barn or something like that, and a house, or is it, if they're within, an acre or something, it's essentially going to be the same?
Yeah, and so in the report, we only look at the houses themselves, right? So we don't look at buildings, we don't look at barns, and that is actually, we just verify that from the way. Because the typical way that it's done is that for the actual residents themselves, the reason why we don't look at things like barns and outbuildings and that, there's various window configurations that come from a long line of dairy farmers. We had no windows in dairy farm, like very few. You're spending a little bit of time in those places, you're working there as part of the course, day in, day out. There's so many other things going on in those buildings versus, trying to protect the nuisance. It's not a health event, it does not cause electric seizures, it does not cause any of those things. It's a nuisance, quite candidly. And we're trying to, the kind of universal standard that has come down is that 30 hours a year, that's reasonable in order to keep that nuisance level down. So it really is on the residence itself.
Mr. Chair, just jumping quickly, I wanted to just make sure that the planning commission heard Mr. Caputo said regarding the 45 dBA standard, and that is that Liberty cannot meet that standard for this project. So if that's the planning commission's determination, I don't want to be rude, but I'm not sure if it makes a ton of sense for us to spend time and money and ordinance, probably tired answering questions because Liberty can't comply with that standard as part of this project. So I just want you to take that into consideration in deciding how to proceed here. And I'm not saying we won't answer questions, but
It's your application, I'm not gonna tell you what to do. We're trying to go through a process. Whenever you feel it's not productive, you can move on.
we're not sure that it would be productive to have a lot more discussion on the questions the planning commission may have. Unless I will say the planning commission can certainly make a motion for reconsideration and consider perhaps adopting a standard along the lines we proposed
there's no more discussions with Liberty then as far as questions?
Well, I don't wanna jump ahead, but it's,
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm at with the whole thing, cause I mean, I have multiple, but I mean, I have also issues with the ordinance book and compliance as well, but I'd rather get some clarification for them too. I mean, it's unfortunate.
All right, I understand, we're willing to go forward then and answer those questions, and I guess we could just suggest and keep in consideration that if down the line you're thinking that's not gonna be something that you'd like to consider, then, you know, I don't wanna waste anyone's time.
no, I appreciate that. I mean, like everyone has said, we've been here for a couple of years now, you guys made that point, a number of times as well. I hate to stop it here, but it's you guys, you know, this is your application, so you say the word, we'll hold on.
Yeah, let's proceed with, let's proceed with any answering any further questions, but again, I just wanted to make it crystal clear that, you know, as we've said, the 45 DBA all-10 compliance is certainly a non-starter, and so if there's a way to get through or over that, you know, I think there's a potential to, you know, negotiate reasonable conditions, but I think ultimately that's the biggest, issue at the moment, right? So, but we're gonna ask any questions if you have any others.
So I think you answered, I'm still not, on the shadow flicker, you've answered it. Whether I understand it or not is another question. I'll give it some thought, look into it more, assuming we don't reach a decision.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I mean, again, what I would say is that this is the international model that is used right around the world on every wind project that I've ever worked on, over 100, but I know that, you know, right across the world, it's the one that we publish shadow clicker reports, shadow clicker publications, and again, so this isn't just you know, something that, Ms. Blank did modeling, has done hundreds of these projects, know her well, she's very credible, very, you know, well, researched on it, and myself as well, in terms of understanding the model. There is no other model or shadow clicker that exists other than this one that's universally used.
And just to confirm, has this model been used to measure outbuildings and things like that, or is that never done?
So, the way that I just verified that there's 552 occupied and habitable structures, she did model it at the home as appropriate, as outbuildings. In my experience, no, we don't do outbuildings, we don't do, you know, sheds or barns or silos or any of those things. But it is done at the home because it's meant to ensure that while you're in your house, that you're not being, there's not that nuisance of being in your house. So, I want to say that as well as we would look at, churches and businesses in the area as well, that they just weren't there for the model as far as I'm aware.
Just another question, I guess, to clarify that. So on the map that Liberty provided, you actually provide a boundary of the flicker. And so when you're talking about the receptors that she listed that are in compliance or out of compliance, that's the list you're talking about, right? You're not talking about the boundary, because the boundary doesn't change. That, I call it a butterfly pattern.
Yeah, it is the butterfly effect, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
That boundary doesn't change. So you're either in the boundary or you're out of the boundary, whether it's a barn, a church, a house.
that's true, I mean, if you're inside, but again, the shadow clicker ordinance, as well as the state ordinance, as well as universally across the US, is for the house itself.
Right.
And that's why if you looked at the appendix, the 552 homes with the shadow clicker, yes, if you had a barn, you could figure it out by looking at that, the shadow clicker, the butterfly effect, whether you're in or outside.
So, Mr. Chairman, you know, if you want, at this meeting or at a later time, I can pull up the map that they provided that shows all of those butterfly patterns. I mean, they're in the report, they're just in paper. And so you can see for yourself, you know, each individual house, location, barn, whatever. And I've pulled up the aerial map that shows the, you know, the topography, the trees, the houses, and that kind of thing. So that information is available. And then I would also just like to offer that the other information that they have provided that supplements the sound issue is they provided an Esri layer. It's basically a layer of information that shows all of the sound contours. So in their report, they have provided you, and on the screen the other day, they showed you circles for the 50. This is the boundary of the 50, and some of them were touching, so they were overlapping. But in the information they've provided, they've also provided, the 50, the 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 44, and so on and so forth. And so that information has been provided, and it's something that I'm sure we can share and we can review and see what impact it has. I was looking at it a few moments ago, and I haven't evaluated whether the 45 is in compliance or not. I only evaluated the 50. But in general, the 45 tends to land about where the outermost setback is. So I think it's the 1,060 feet roughly is the outermost setback typically that you see the other circles around the turbines. For some reason, that 45 contour tends to be about that same.
Well, to be clear, the loudest sound that was predicted in that contour in the maps that were provided by Mr. Hanger is 47 decibels LEQ in the non-participating hall. You add 2 decibels to that, then it's 49. In terms of the shout, yes, absolutely, Ms. Mike provided the 30 contour, but it's not a question of what's inside and outside. If there's a home inside that 30 contour, and again, we don't look just at the contour maps, we pull out the numbers from the table. If you're over 30 hours a year or over 30 minutes at a time, the commitment there is curtailment, shutting the turbines down or anything significant beyond that, so it meets your ordinance. Again, universally kind of conducted. So whatever's inside there, if there's a house inside there, absolutely, but if it's a barn or anything else, it's not part of the ordinance, it's not part of standard practice, looking at shadow and why we set the standard that we have. And again, reminding you guys that your shadow figure standard goes beyond what the state requires now. Anybody with 30 minutes of time, any house that more than 30 minutes time has to be curtailed for that as well.
Understood. Just, I kind of want to, for me personally, the state issue is deciding because our job is compliance with our ordinance. If I just have to make a decision and say what's best for the township, then I would obviously look at okay, what is the state proposing, what makes the most sense, what's the financial angle, whatever it be. I don't know that we have that authority unless we address it by conditions in some way to say, we want to overcome what we do with non-compliance because we're scared of what the state's going to do. And to me personally, I'm not like I understand the point. I'm not sure I feel it's within what we've taken a note to do, which is
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure, what are you concerned with compliance then? Like if we put the 45.
I'm just saying in general, like the concept of the state is going to come in and do this, like that's
for sure.
I agree that that's relevant. I don't know that when I took my oath of of office to uphold the ordinances.
So they know what our
I don't know. So that being said, our ordinance does not limit the definition of shadow flicker to a dwelling. So I understand your position that that's the standard, but technically shadow flicker is when, and I've seen it different. I think it's the wind. What's the government? There's a government wind site that has a bunch of resources.
It's probably the DOE's.
It could be, yeah. So I think they define shadow flicker and say it's the sun shining through, causing a flickering effect. That's the definition. Then they say this causes a concern primarily, within dwellings, etc. So that's kind of two issues. One is the definition of what it is. Second is what are you trying to mitigate? I guess this is an open question for others as well. I'm not reading our ordinance as saying it's only dwellings of non-participating property owners that get that protection. So if someone has a barn and maybe they're not, based on their window placement and everything, maybe it's not going to be that significant. But I don't see anything in our ordinance that says you should not count that. So when I think of conditions, one of the things I think of is if if someone has a barn and they've got a workshop or something where maybe they spend a lot of time there, maybe they don't, maybe they milk their cows there, and that's when they're gonna get the shadow flicker significantly. And it's, that could bother them. I don't wanna gloss over that just because most of the concern is around the dwelling, if our call.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, you are correct, I just reread the ordinance, and you're correct, it doesn't specify dwelling. We certainly, there's not a house, okay? So we, dwelling resident, just call it a house, okay, because I grew up calling them houses, but the reason that we interpreted it as house, you are correct, we did make that interpretation as a team, is because universally that is what, everywhere else we gotta go, that is the standard, is to a house, not to the other buildings, not to barns and the like. And again, the reason why, over many years we developed that 30 hours a year, Chad understand, was something when you are, like you say, in your kitchen in the morning, it's usually in the morning and in the evening, sunrise, sunset, and most of that is going to occur, that you're enjoying your coffee in the morning, or a cold beer at night, that you're not having an excessive amount of that occurring in your house. So that, you are correct, we did interpret this as dwelling. We believe, a house, we believe that house is the appropriate way to go, that, we simply don't see people concerned in their barns or in their buildings when we do those studies. But you are correct, it does not specify in the ordinance. It was our professional interpretation.
I appreciate that. I don't expect a precise answer, but does that materially change what the numbers would be? Assuming, let's assume all the outbuildings are within an acre, give or take.
I mean, again, having, come from a long way first, as you say, most outbuildings, if you're a farmer, most of your barn, your sheds, your working buildings, I think of it like a driving shed, for example, where we're parking the combine, the tractor. Again, that's something, rarely has a lot of windows, but you're right, those tend to be, and I certainly know this area in Michigan, I've hunted this area, most of the buildings are gonna be relatively close by the house. You don't say your barn lot back, you do, you walk them with the cows. I think it could have some impact in terms of curtailment for that over 30 hours. We would have to look at, let's say the house was, if the house is at 30 hours or more, it's gonna obviously, the barn's not because again, the swept area is gonna be fairly large, close in. We could check, I guess we could endeavor to check how many other buildings that would not include a home on that property would affect, but my guess is it wouldn't be all that many.
Okay, I appreciate that. Are there any other questions on shadow flicker? I do want, because I'm not sure how many of you will be able to make it if we continue into tomorrow night, so I want to try to get on things that would need some more expert analysis. And I don't know if it's one of them or not, but setbacks, as they were measured, and Mr. Conley touched on that a little bit in terms of if it's a close case, are you measured, where are you measuring from? Is it the interior of the tower, is it the exterior of the tower, is it the exterior of the foundation, is it the tip of the roof?
It's measured from the center of the turbine, and that's industry standard.
Is that industry standard in your opinion reflected in our ordinance?
That's not clear. It isn't clear to say.
So the challenge I have when I look at our ordinance is it talks about a setback. It says wind turbines shall be set back from whatever it is. And then there's a definition of wind turbine that includes a list of things, but it basically everything, the whole, including all the blades and everything like that. So when I read that, I guess my initial thought is the setback from a wind turbine, if the wind turbine is the whole thing, which should be measured from the outermost point. And I think of it this way: if the ordinance was measuring the setback of a house, to a side yard property line, and it said setbacks from a building shall be 50 feet from the nearest property line, and it said a building is defined as the foundation, the siding, and the roof overhang. We would measure not from the center of the house, but from the roof overhang in that scenario. So that's it. I don't know what the right way to do it is. When we looked at updating our ordinances, it's something we changed to, I believe, measure similar to what you're talking about, but when I read our current ordinance, I don't read it that way. I read it as saying you measure from the turbine, which includes the whole thing.
Understood, that the way it's worded is unclear. Just for reference, I know we're not talking too much about state setting, but the state setting will specifically say to the center turbine. That's been industry standard, so.
And Mr. Chair, sorry, but Mike, the reason that we do it, like as you say, you have the blade swept area, right, as opposed to just the base of the turbine. The reason, you know, to give the example for your, like, the distance to the property line, right, and as opposed to the house is that. Setback from houses are more for to try to line up the sound levels. Setbacks to property lines are ensure for blade failure, ice throw, and tower collapse. Typically, it's, you know, yours would be is the height of the turbine plus what would be, then yours, yeah, and then sometimes it's like 1.1 times, but the reason why you measure from the base of the tower to the property line, because it's to avoid fall down the turbine onto the neighborhood property. So yes, you've got the swept area, but the reason that the setback is from a tip height plus some multiplier or some number of feet is so that you ensure that if you do have a safety issue, if there's ice or blade, it stays on the property itself. So it, as Craig said, universally, again, I've never seen, the red car, you know, yeah, I think I rarely have ever seen setbacks where you're dealing from the swept rotary area to a feature. It is from the turbine out, and that protection is there to ensure like the tip like plus the 50 feet. That's why, and I agree your ordinance doesn't specify. There's a lot of like, you know, with a lot of these things, it would be in a perfect world, sure, it would be nicer if it was crystal clear, and I certainly understand as a planning commission, it'd be challenging. That's why we're bringing sort of the, not what, I don't like the term industry standard, these are government standards set by states, set by other townships, set by, you know, so if you look at North Dakota, New York, California, Vermont, when they have state siting, it's always from the base of the turbine.
From a legal perspective, do you want to comment on how you would interpret that definition of wind turbine in the ordinance as lining up with how the setback is defined?
Well, I mean, there's a vague distinction, which I think there is here. One of the things you do look at is, you know, industry standards, to try to determine how the ordinance should be interpreted. And you look at expert opinions, and, you know, I think the expert opinion here tonight was, you looked at, the setback is measured from the center of the turbine. So, you know, in my opinion, if you measure it from the center of the turbine, if there's ambiguity of any sort, which it sounds like everybody agrees there is, at least from our perspective, there is.
What is the basis for the ambiguity? Because again, I'm just looking at the definitions and I'm replacing wind turbine with building because I think that's a fairly common, you know, way to, when you look at setbacks, a lot of definitions of setbacks outside of wind ordinances are talking about from buildings and they do define a building. Sometimes they define that differently. So what is the ambiguity?
Well, you're obviously the blade is not stationary, right? So are you measuring from where the base of the turbine is? Are you measuring from the turbine at a particular location? Are you measuring from the tip of the turbine when it's farther away, when you're placing your, when it's pointed at a 90-degree angle? I mean, I don't know what that means because it's not a stationary part of the wind turbine system, right? So I can't say even that is clear.
I appreciate that. Any other questions on setbacks? It's 10 o'clock. Is there any preference to adjourn here and continue tomorrow? Or do you want to go before black and white? So that's a
Is you think it can continue tonight, or?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Will there be representatives tonight for Liberty to answer questions or not?
Sorry, what was the question?
So will there be representatives from Liberty to answer some other questions?
There will be some of us available, but I think one of the things I think is important to, sort of tonight is how the 45 dBA L10 is treated as that's the critical piece to, you know, the next steps here.
I guess I still feel it's premature to say, from my perspective, conditions are included in the package. And some of them, you know, will apply more or less depending on where other ones might end up. I'm speaking hypothetically, I don't have a clear, you know, picture in my head of this, if, you know, the sound level is this, these conditions apply, the sound level is this, those conditions apply. I don't know if I do as well. I personally wouldn't feel ready to say these are the conditions or these are the standards where it would go forward until we've had deliberations. And I don't know if you guys have done your questions, I still have.
No, I got lots of questions, but I guess I got another question really quick. Is this working? Yeah. If you don't want to answer any more questions because of the 45 decibel, instead of us making a decision, can't you withdraw your SLUP right now application to make it easier for all of us?
Well, I think we'd let you make a decision. I mean, we filed an application, we paid the fee, we've been waiting for 2 years, I think we asked for a decision.
No, and I think that's fair. I understand you guys do want to do that. You certainly do have that option. I would not want to pressure them to do that because
Well, I don't want to pressure them either. I just feel like I'm being pressured to come up with a quick answer
No, and
because we can't fall within the 45 decibel. You know?
I agree, and I understand where you guys are coming from, but the time involved, the 3 nights we've spent here, there's a lot to go through. I still have some questions. We touched on a lot of the questions I had, and I appreciate that. I don't know how close you guys are in terms of asking the questions.
I'm going to ask a question right now on conditions. I mean, you have sent over many resolutions and amendments to resolutions with many of Liberty's approval with conditions. Now I'm going to ask you if you can tell me how can the Speaker Township enforce your conditions? Because from my understanding, the state, 502, pretty much says that when it comes to green power, we don't have a whole lot of say on conditions. Most of them will end up in court because we can't stop you once you're 10% vested.
So that's a good question. I think that if we can get to the point where we can come up with something that is a workable project, my expectation is that this will involve some discussion with the board. Because as you probably know, the board has adopted an ordinance as well that makes changes to your existing ordinance. And so we're going to need to understand if the township is going to attempt to enforce that ordinance against Liberty in its application or not. If it is, then, you know, it probably doesn't make much sense to try to proceed under this application. If it's not, or if there's an agreement that can be reached that excludes Liberty's application from that amendment to the ordinance, and again, this probably has to be done by some sort of an agreement with the board that would resolve the issue you raised, which is Liberty going to agree to be bound by the conditions that it's presented in the discussion tonight? I think the answer is, yeah, we can reach an agreement like that. It would also include the payment of $2,000 a megawatt as a contractual obligation, because as you said, it's a condition that's going to go away in the state study that comes into play. So I think that if you approve the project with reasonable conditions for both our benefits, the townships and Liberty, this is going to be a discussion that needs to continue forward. And that's what we would intend to do, have further discussions with the township. As I've said, and I think Liberty said for a long time, our goal is to work with the township to develop this project. However, if we can't, and, you know, today it's been difficult to do that, then we'll have to go to state site. But, you know, we're here trying to work through reasonable conditions with you. So that's why we're here. And again, the 45 EVA thing is, kind of throws a wrinkle in all that, because frankly, from our perspective, it's non-starter. And so when I asked the question before, I was concerned that if you made a finding that the 45 EVA, when it applies to the project, period at the end, then I'm not sure exactly what the condition would be that would be overground for that. Because we suggested one, which apparently wasn't acceptable. So, yeah, so that's kind of where we are. have to do in order to give up that right is entering some sort of an agreement with the board, because your board has already adopted another ordinance, which effectively undoes a lot of what is in our application. So I think if we can come to an agreement, we're gonna have to, in terms of the 50 dBA and the other conditions that are protected to the township tonight, the next stop for us is talking with the board about getting rid of the right to go to state siting. Getting rid of the right to go to state siting, and the board getting rid of this new ordinance, or agreeing not to try to enforce it against liberty. Otherwise, I kind of see us at a standstill.
Well, in my eyes, if we make an agreement with Liberty with conditions, we are making a contractual agreement with you. And you use the phrase, you have the option to go to 233. To me, that means regardless of whatever we agree on.
Yeah, I think it's really not a contract. I mean, it's, you guys can impose whatever conditions you want, and we can't really dictate what those conditions are. We can suggest reasonable conditions. We can tell you conditions do or don't work for us. But we want to be careful about saying, yeah, we'll agree to whatever condition you come up with. We need to be some back and forth, coming up with reasonable conditions. And that condition you mentioned is one that, theoretically we could tweak, that if in fact we agree on a 50-day limit, then, we could have a condition that says, provided the board approves this and agrees the other ordinances are going to apply to Liberty's application, then, yeah, we would do a state site. I mean, I think there's, and then that's one point. The other point is, the new state siting guidelines that have been adopted by staff suggest that even if you have a project that spans multiple jurisdictions, and one township has approved the project, but another township has not, then you have to go to state siting for the overall project regardless. However, an applicant can, by stipulation, agree to be bound by conditions from the township that did approve the project. So it may be necessary, regardless of what happens, for us to go to state siting for the overall project. But we could agree to be bound by conditions, and that's something we thought about putting in here. But again, we have this other issue that we need to resolve with the board as well, because there's a number, unfortunately, of levels of complexity in this situation.
I'm hesitant again to get into the state aspect of it, but I guess from your perspective, what does state siting do to the project given the increase in setbacks and where it is in Fremont? Is that, what impact would that have if, say, we approved it and for some reason the township board didn't reach an agreement that, as you're describing, that there was some sort of state siting involved? What would that do, from a setback perspective compared to the other?
So I think it's want to make sure I understand the question. I think what you're saying is if we can come to terms with the 50 dBA and go to the board for a settlement, and the board were to essentially not be able to reach a settlement with the board, I think your question is, what's the benefit to go to state siting? Is that what your question is?
Well, I'm trying to understand because Dr. Gambar mentioned that is in your conditions, and so there's at least some scenario pending the township board agreeing. But assuming we did, reach our conditions, whatever they are, and you go to state siting, right now you're proposing, I think, 26 turbines, although in your conditions, you said you're dropping to power 10, so I don't know if that impacts it. What impact does that have? Because those are increased setbacks, even though they're lower setbacks.
So I think like in that situation, essentially you'd be adding back turbine number 10, and you'd be, obviously we'd be operating the site at the new standard, which would allow for higher sounds. It would remove the 30-minute shadow flicker curtailment. And so essentially we'd be in a situation where, we'd be able to operate the facility under those less
So you, just to make sure I understand, you feel you're able within the scope as you have it now to recycle turbines within the existing properties without encroaching further on participating property owners?
Correct, that's correct.
I'm not gonna give him a chance to talk again. I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting until tomorrow night at 6 o'clock.
Just to confirm, is that,
I
we
make
don't
a
have to
motion that
continue the meeting at this point.
Huh?
We don't have to continue the meeting at this point, right?
Just adjourning the meeting.
We're adjourning the meeting.
That's what I said.
We have another meeting tomorrow.
We have
We're not
another meeting tomorrow
continuing.
night, 6 o'clock, same place.
So the motion is to adjourn.
I'll
Is there-
second.
Is there a second?